December 11, 2025. 300 drones, 2,000 kilometers of Russian territory, the largest and widest-reaching strike of the entire war. What happened next made Russia burn. This is how Ukraine delivered an early Christmas present. This wasn't just another strike. This was the biggest aerial assault Ukraine has ever launched. 300 long-range drones, accompanied by cruise missiles, striking targets across a 1,240-mile stretch of Russia. Oil refineries, airfields, and in a first for this war, an oil rig in the Caspian Sea. Today, I'm breaking down Ukraine's most impressive operation, the strategy, the execution, the devastating impact. Let's dive in. December 11th, Ukraine launched its largest aerial assault. 300 long-range drones hurtling across Russia, some accompanied by cruise missiles, striking targets across 2,000 kilometers. That's over 1,240 miles of Russian territory. The targets were diverse and strategic. Several oil refineries, multiple airfields, and for the first time in this war, an oil rig located in the Caspian Sea. Ukraine also sent drones toward Moscow. But all was not as it seemed with that strike. The Kyiv Post reports Ukraine launched about 60 drones at Moscow, though some reports claim over 100. Regardless of the exact number, those drones didn't have specific targets. They arrived in the Russian capital and began circling, triggering a massive air defense response. Moscow reacted exactly as Ukraine wanted. Local authorities issued general warnings. Residents headed toward air raid shelters. 4 of Moscow's airports were placed on lockdown for between 8 and 10 hours. Between 130 and 200 flights were canceled. Thousands of passengers stranded. None of Ukraine's Moscow drones hit targets. And that was the point. This initial horde of drones was a distraction, designed to keep Russian defenders busy. As the other 240 drones headed toward real targets, it was a brilliant decoy strategy. Ukraine knew Russia had to take drones heading toward Moscow seriously. Not only is Moscow home to the Kremlin, and often the location where Putin is most likely to be, but Ukraine has also hit Moscow several times in the past. March 11th saw Ukraine attack the Moscow region. The BBC described it as the biggest Ukrainian airstrike up to that point. A couple months later, The Guardian reported on strikes. Time to coincide with world leaders arriving for Putin's Victory Day parade. The December 11th attacks took advantage of these earlier strikes. Russia knows its capital city is both valuable and vulnerable, and it did everything in its power to protect it against drones that were never intended to hit targets. With Russia's focus placed on Moscow, Ukraine could set about its real business, taking out targets across a massive geographic area. Oil refineries, airfields, energy infrastructure. The decoy strategy worked perfectly. Ukraine's December 11th strike hit 3 oil refineries and 1 fuel depot within a handful of hours, breaking Ukraine's usual pattern of hitting 2 or 3 refineries per night. Ukrainian military bloggers citing social media evidence confirmed strikes against several refineries. A refinery in the Samara region was set ablaze, about 800 kilometers from Ukraine's border. The same went for a refinery in the Afipsky region, and one in Saratov, 400 kilometers and 600 kilometers from Ukraine respectively. Ukraine's drones also hit a fuel storage depot in the Volgograd region, 700 kilometers from Ukraine. Almost all of Ukraine's drones flew unimpeded toward targets, suggesting the decoys sent to Moscow did their jobs perfectly. In Samara, home of the Ryazan oil refinery, locals claim to have seen between 15 and 20 drones pass through their skies with no air defense engagement. One drone was filmed flying low enough to skim treetops, suggesting Ukraine kept drones outside radar range. Afipsky faced a similarly sized package of drones, setting fuel tanks on fire, potentially reducing the refinery's production by 20 to 30%. In both cases, Ukraine struck refineries that it has hit many times already in 2025. December 11th marked the 3rd strike on Samara since August. The Afipsky refinery has been hit even harder, the 6th time since July that Ukraine's drones crashed into that facility. This strike repetition is part of Ukraine's new strategy. In 2024 and early 2025, Ukraine hit Russian refineries in isolation. A strike would land, then Ukraine would search for another target, giving Russia time to repair the damage. Now Ukraine hits as many refineries as it can, as often as it can, causing incrementally more damage with each strike, making repair work far more labor-intensive and time-consuming. The result? Targeted refineries stay offline longer. Russia's ability to produce refined oil products declines. Gasoline and diesel shortages increase. Fewer products that Russia can sell overseas. It's a strategy designed to bleed Russia dry of its most crucial resource, and each passing month sees Ukraine lean more heavily into it. The Moscow Times highlighted how heavily Ukraine relied on refinery strikes during the latter half of 2025. At least 14 drone strikes against refineries were recorded in November alone, breaking Ukraine's monthly record. The Afipsky plant near Krasnodar was among them. With an annual production capacity of 9.1 million tons, Russia's refining capacity was cut from 5.3 million barrels per day to 5 million as a result of these strikes. The longest ranged attack hit an offshore oil production platform in the Caspian Sea, some 1,500 kilometers from the nearest probable Ukrainian drone launch sites, scoring at least 4 hits, setting the Lukoil-owned rig on fire. The rig pumps crude oil from 20 seabed wells. Ukraine likely used Lut-E drones for this strike. Push-propeller unmanned aerial vehicles. Each can be loaded with an explosive warhead, weighing between 120 and 350 kilograms, more than enough firepower to destroy refinery equipment or set an entire oil rig on fire. The Moscow Times confirmed at least 4 long-range drones hit their targets. The facility is named the Filanovsky rig, one of the largest Russian-owned oil rigs in the Caspian Sea. The rig is capable of producing around 120,000 barrels per day. That adds up to 6 million tons of oil per year, according to the U.S. Energy Information Administration. The crude Russia extracts from Caspian Sea rigs is blended inside the country and marketed as Urals crude oil. This type of crude was selling for $52 per barrel on December 10th. Assuming the refinery is closed for just one day, Russia has lost around $6.3 million. That's not a bad return for drones estimated to cost $200,000 per unit. Ukraine followed up oil attacks by hitting military targets, sending drones to airfields across Russia. Ryazan, Voronezh, Ivano, all were targets. Ukraine went even further, sending drones to an airfield in the Arctic Murmansk region, sending a message that it can score hits. Even in installations Russia thinks are well out of reach, all of these strikes were successful. In Murmansk, a drone smashed into one of the runways, leaving behind a massive crater, making the runway impossible for aircraft to use. The drone sent to Ivano scored hits against 3 hangars, likely damaging a pair of Su-34 fighter jets in the process. In Voronezh, air defense platforms defending the base were targeted, hinting that Ukraine is planning a follow-up attack on assets these defenses can no longer protect. In Ryazan, Ukraine struck an airfield fuel depot, triggering explosions and secondary blasts, depriving the Ryazan airfield's jets of fuel they need to fly. Ukraine likely struck these targets to limit Russia's ability to launch missiles and glide bombs into Ukrainian territory from the bases. Any attack that damages a runway or destroys fuel stops Russia's aircraft from taking off. This operation demonstrates Ukraine's expanding capabilities. 300 drones, multiple cruise missiles, striking across 2,000 kilometers of Russian territory. Oil refineries offline, airfields damaged, energy infrastructure burning. The financial impact is staggering. Millions in daily losses from offline refineries, repair costs running into hundreds of millions. Operational disruption across multiple military sectors. But the strategic impact goes deeper. Ukraine proved it can strike anywhere in Russia. That distance no longer provides security. That rear area facilities are vulnerable. Russia must now defend a vastly expanded perimeter, stretching air defense resources thin, diverting assets from frontline positions. This was Ukraine's response to pressure for territorial concessions, a demonstration that they maintain offensive capability, that they can inflict strategic costs on Russia, that any peace agreement must account for Ukraine's strength, not just Russia's demands. The gloves are officially off. Every oil facility and military installation within range is now considered a legitimate target. This was Ukraine's biggest strike of the war. 300 drones, 2,000 kilometers of targets, oil refineries burning, airfields damaged, historic firsts achieved. Ukraine proved that scale and sophistication can be combined for devastating strategic effect. Russia's rear areas are no longer safe. Distance no longer equals security. And Ukraine's message is clear. They can strike anywhere, anytime, with precision and power. What impressed you most about this operation? The scale, the decoy strategy, the Caspian Sea strike? Drop your analysis in the comments below. If you want more military analysis breaking down Ukraine's most impressive operations, hit subscribe.